You're listening to Bad Girlfriend Radio. I'm your host, Bree Schmidt. I'm a relationship coach and educator offering advice and insight that is no shame, no sugarcoat, and no BS. Today, I'm answering some of your questions about relationships, dating, breaking up, self-love, and more. And I did an episode like this before, back in episode 13. And I think it's really interesting to see what kind of questions people have and what they might be struggling with. So keep on listening to see if I answer a question that you have, and if at the end of this episode you still have a burning question about relationships and love, let me know. You can send me a message on Instagram at Bree_Schmidt, and I say let's just go ahead and get started. Are you ready? Do you enjoy listening to Bad Girlfriend Radio, but what you really want is a chance to talk one-on-one about dating and relationships? If you are ready to start thriving in dating and your love life, I am here to coach you in personalized coaching sessions that are all about you, and all you need is an internet connection. I offer coaching through private video calls as well as through email, and you can book your first consultation call with me for free if you just head over to breeschmidt.com and tap Work With Me, or you can find the link over in this episode's show description. We'll get deep into the thought patterns and limiting beliefs that are holding you back, and you'll learn how to shift your mindset to gain confidence and empower yourself to live as your highest, best bad girlfriend self in your love life. I'll give you action steps, worksheets, and resources to keep you engaged in growth throughout the whole process. And all of this is tailor-made for you and your needs and your goals. And hey, it doesn't matter if you're single or in a relationship or married. This is about you showing up the way that you want to, no matter your relationship status. Whether you are looking to start dating with confidence, heal through your breakup, or stop fighting with your partner, I am here to work with you. So go to breeschmidt.com and tap Work With Me, or go find the link in this episode's show description. Now, on to today's discussion. All right, let's hop right into the question. So question number 1, is it okay to take back a promise that I made? So for this person, first they said something and they made a promise, but then upon second thought, they realized that they couldn't honor that promise anymore. So typically, breaking a promise kind of goes along with lying, right? Because you say something that you don't really mean. So breaking a promise where you knew from the start that you could not keep it, you didn't really ever have any intention of keeping that promise, or you just said something in the moment to kind of, make the other person happy, but you didn't really think about what you were saying, isn't really so authentic, is it? But with that said, if you make a promise that you decide later is just not right for you, there is no one forcing you to keep it. Like there isn't a rule or a law saying that if you tell your partner or someone in your personal life something, if you make some kind of promise to them that you must keep it, or, you're going to be punished or something. Obviously, you have the freedom to change your mind. The worst thing in this situation is making a promise that you know you won't keep, or making a promise just to appease the other person, but really knowing all along that it's not right for you. And if this is a pattern of making promises just to make someone else happy, even though you're sacrificing yourself, I would say that you might be a people pleaser. So short answer, it's okay to take back a promise that you made if you just gave it more thought and you realize that you don't feel comfortable going through with whatever that action or that offer was. You can absolutely change your mind. It is okay. You're allowed to do that. But I would take that as an opportunity to learn something about yourself. Take some time to get to know yourself and what drove you to make that promise in the first place. Did you just want to make them happy? Did you want them to feel positively about you? Did you want them to like you or love you? Did you just not think about what you were saying? And if so, is this something that you do often, that you say or do things without really thinking about the consequences later? Or did you feel pressure to make that promise? And if so, where does that pressure come from? So take some time to think about these questions and try to create a future where you can confidently say no from the beginning. instead of making that promise that you can't keep. Or stop spending time with people who might pressure you to do things that you don't want to do. All right, next question. Is it true that once a cheater, always a cheater? Should I avoid giving a second chance to someone who cheated on me? You know, some of the biggest BS I have ever heard in my life is people don't change. Some people truly believe that people don't change. But that is complete BS. People can absolutely change. Sometimes it might be a negative change, but oftentimes it's growth. People can change to be better. If they couldn't, there would be no point in me even talking right now, doing this podcast, coaching women on their relationships. There would be no point. There would be basically no point in even living if we can't change. Changing and growing and evolving are absolutely possible. So it's not true to assume that once someone cheats, they will always cheat. Like they now have some kind of cheating disease that just makes them compulsively cheat. But when they did cheat, there were reasons behind that decision. There was some kind of thought or feeling that drove that action. So it's important for that person who cheated to know what those conditions were and act differently next time, or change those conditions altogether. If they've worked to become self-aware and they want to do better in the future, it is possible that you could have a relationship with them again and they won't ever cheat again. It is definitely possible. But this is also a really personal decision too. Trust is so important, and you have to be with someone who you want to trust. I talk all about trust and betrayal over in last week's episode, right before this one. So you can go give that a listen if you haven't already. You can give them a second chance if you want to, and if you're open to the possibility of rebuilding trust with them. And also, they have to make an effort to improve the relationship and show you that they're prioritizing the relationship and growth. So like I said, go listen to that episode if you haven't yet. I talk much more about what to do after a betrayal, whether that be that someone cheated or any other kind of betrayal, and how to rebuild that trust again. All right, next question. I've been getting to know someone for a while and I want to make things official, but I still don't know what we are. What should I do? This question reminds me how much culture and social norms can play a huge role in things, because I think that this is a really common problem for a lot of people who are dating, especially in Western countries. For me, being from the US, I know all about this and all about the talk, when to have the talk and who should initiate and how to have the talk. And basically the talk is that conversation where you finally ask, what are we? What do you want to be? Do you want to be more? Do you want to have a relationship? And you kind of get clarity on the status of your relationship. So if you want to make things official, you want to actually have a committed relationship, but right now you're just dating, getting to know each other, not really using any kind of label, it can feel really awkward talking about it. It can feel really vulnerable. It is really vulnerable to ask, what are we? Because once you initiate that, you are making it clear that you want to be committed. You want an actual relationship. You choose them. You're making that clear. And there's that chance that they won't feel the same way. And you might wind up feeling rejected. So I know it's a really vulnerable position to be in. And I mentioned culture because where I live now here in Japan, this scenario isn't actually so common. People actually have a confession where they confess in a kind of dramatic way that they're into you, and they ask you really kind of formally to be in a relationship with them. I mean, to me, being American, it's almost like a marriage proposal. Like, it is literally foreign to me as an American, that whole style of initiating a commitment, like just to be in a relationship. Like, you're not even actually getting engaged. You're just saying like, hey, be my girlfriend or be my boyfriend. But my partner, who is now my husband, he didn't actually do this at all. There was never any confession. And so actually we ended up in that scenario that I was talking about before, where you have to have the talk, right? So yeah, he never made that big move, and he never did the whole confession thing. And then that's when I was like, okay, like I got this. We gotta have the talk. So I initiated that conversation because I wanted to know. I wasn't going to keep punishing myself, being confused just to avoid feeling vulnerable and maybe a little bit awkward. I mean, which one would you prefer? Being vulnerable but getting clarity and getting the answer that you want? Or staying in this confusing haze of not knowing if the other person even wants the same thing as you? And obviously, from my example, I had that conversation with my husband back when we were dating, and I asked what he wanted us to be. And I made it clear that I didn't want to just keep hanging out for fun, casually. I wanted to have a real relationship. And I mean, now we're married, so, success. So to answer the original question, you don't need to wait for someone else to make that move that you could make yourself. You can make that move. Initiate that conversation and let them know what you want. There is no rule that says that you can't be the one to have that conversation. And if you're a heterosexual woman dating a man, forget all those outdated stereotypes about women being too forward or too aggressive. If someone thinks that you're too aggressive because you, after dating for a while, want to have a committed relationship and you communicate this, if they think that you are too aggressive because of that, chances are that's not someone worth dating anyway. Next question. Why am I always attracted to jerks and Fboys? Those kind of guys can be really charming because they know how to play the game. But if you don't want to play a game and you don't want them to play you, get very clear on if someone is being kind of superficially charming, or if they really seem like someone who can match your values, at the end of the day, the things that are the most important to you. A sweet talker is nice, but that won't last long. Or someone who knows how to be a gentleman in kind of a stereotypical and traditional way. And not in a way that is really coming from being kind and compassionate. There's a difference. It's just charm. If you take out true compassion and kindness, it's just empty charm. Don't fall for that charm. That could be one reason why you keep being attracted to the wrong kind of guys. And if you've ever had a really toxic relationship with these kind of guys, and if you're still recovering from that, it can be also kind of easy to subconsciously go for that kind of guy again because it feels familiar. If you haven't really healed yet from an ex, for example, and then you meet some guy who is a jerk in the same exact way that your ex was, that will feel familiar. And you might feel some comfort in that person because they feel familiar. To you, maybe that kind of person is the only person that you can associate with love or passion or having a relationship. So subconsciously, you keep going for that kind of person because it's familiar, because it's comforting. And this can even become a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way where some women start to feel really negatively about dating, and they keep dating jerk after jerk after jerk, bad match after bad match. And then at the end of all of it, they say, see, dating sucks. Men suck. But the problem is actually that they're going after that same kind of person over and over. And another way of approaching this problem of only being attracted to jerks and Fboys is to consider that you might be overlooking guys that actually could be a really great potential partner, that are everything that you say that you want. They're kind, they're loyal, they're honest, they have the same values as you. But when you meet them, because they're not charming or they're not a traditional gentleman type, opening the door for you or whatever, they don't have that package that you prefer. They don't look the way that you prefer, So then you immediately dismiss them. And I know that sexual attraction is important. I know physical attraction is important, but your mind will start to see these better matches as being attractive, even, sexually and physically attractive, once you allow yourself to see them that way. Does that make sense? So if your expectation is basically a guy who walks and talks and looks like an F-boy, that's the problem. You need to be open to guys who don't fit that package that you have in mind. And once you get to know some of those guys, actually, typically that attraction will grow as you get to know them more. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, by the way. So if this is something that you can relate to, go back to episode 8 for more on how to get better at dating and how to stop dating these low quality matches and F-boys, all right? Next question. Is it okay to date a coworker? My answer to this is it depends. First, make sure that you are respecting whatever policies your workplace has about dating. If your workplace has a rule saying that you cannot have an intimate or romantic relationship with a coworker, then don't. And something to really look out for is dating someone at work where there's an inherent professional power difference. So don't date your boss or someone else who has any influence over your job or your position or your salary or anything else related to that. Don't date anyone who has power over you at your company. And also don't date someone that you have power or influence over. This can get very ugly, very messy, and from a legal standpoint, and when talking about sexual harassment, this can get very complicated. So I would recommend not taking that chance. Now, if you're just interested in dating a coworker who is at the same level as you, or maybe they're in a different department or something like that, and there aren't really any policies against that, then you could try. But I would still caution you to keep in mind that if it does backfire, if things don't work out and you break up or you just decide that you're not that compatible, working in the same place may become extremely awkward. But I get that it can be tempting to date someone at work, especially if you spend a lot of time together in the same office or same environment all the time. I know it's a really quick way to get to know each other and become interested. So I wouldn't say that it's a complete no to date a coworker, but just be careful and proceed with caution. Next question. What's the best way to break up during social distancing? I don't want to wait until we're face to face. So if you haven't been seeing someone lately because of COVID, but you have some kind of relationship with them and you want to end that relationship, it can be a bit tricky, especially once you've come to a well thought out decision to break it off. You probably just want to rip that Band-Aid off and get it over with, right? Most likely, if you have a relationship with them, then you've been keeping in touch somehow, right? And chances are right now that's been digital, especially if you're in a long distance relationship and you can't travel right now because of the coronavirus. Then it might be hard to end things face to face. And most of us probably already know that breaking up through a message or something really impersonal like that can be honestly pretty rude and kind of insensitive, right? No one wants to be broken up with, through a text or something, through a, DM on Instagram or something like that. So what do you do if you're in this situation where you really, really just want to break up and get it over with? You don't want to wait for a coronavirus to die down, so it's easier and safer to do it in person. You just want to get it over with. So just as a lot of relationships are forming right now with people in quarantine on dating apps and in Zoom calls, things like that, relationships can also end that way too, if needed. So given the circumstances, I wouldn't suggest that you keep stringing the person along where they're thinking that you have this solid relationship when in fact you really want to break up with them. I wouldn't suggest that you wait, basically. Or even worse, if they're proving to be someone who is actually pretty unhealthy for you and toxic in your life. I mean, yeah, there is no reason to keep suffering through a bad relationship. So all of this rambling is basically to say, go ahead and break up online, but be as respectful as you deem appropriate to the situation. So, for example, instead of sending a quick text to break up with them, actually schedule a Zoom call. Like, put aside time and attention for this difficult conversation and be honest in that conversation. At least taking the time to look at each other's faces on the screen in something like a call, like a video call, and being able to hear each other's voices and sitting with each other through that so that you're both on the same page that this isn't working out and you want to end it is, I think, the best case scenario right now versus something more impersonal like sending a message or waiting until the coronavirus kind of calms down and then you can go meet in person. I wouldn't wait that long. I know a lot of relationships have struggled through this tough time. And so if you've come to the realization that something just really isn't working, then get honest with the other person as soon as possible, even if that means breaking up. All right, next, why do I get attached to people so quickly, even days after meeting them? Very good question. So usually when someone has a tendency of falling for people really fast, it's because they're projecting what they hope someone to be onto the people that they meet. And in this question, the word attached was used, which is pretty accurate to probably what is probably happening, though I would add the word anxious. Chances are you are anxiously attached to these people. Your attachment style is probably insecure and anxious. And if you don't know what I mean, you can go back to episode 14 about attachment styles. You might be almost desperate for connection. And this is essentially hardwired into you and your attachment style, though it can be changed. But it's a very strong tendency to crave love and feel very fearful of not being loved. And with this, like I was saying, you may have a lot of idealizations about what the perfect partner is like, and then you may be projecting this onto potential partners before even really getting to know them. Actually, you're probably not really getting to know them. You're just searching for the ways that they might be like that projection that you have. And you might have a blind spot for other information that doesn't fit that ideal. So you kind of end up picking out the parts that you like about people and just like really looking at those parts and obsessing over those parts. So you end up falling for them really quickly and you become really infatuated. But it's actually with this image of who you want them to be and not with who they really are. Does that make sense? So if you're finding that you're getting attached to people really quickly, question, are you really looking at them or are you looking at who you want them to be? All right, let's do a couple more questions. Next is this one. I can't get over my ex, even though I know that they weren't right for me. How can I finally get over them? So you may have come to the realization that that person wasn't right for you, but yet you still can't get over them. In this situation, I would wonder if it's maybe not that you can't let go of them, but instead you can't let go of the life you thought that you would have by being with them. So if you thought that they were the person that you would go on to marry and have a family with, or, whatever your personal dreams were, maybe you know that they weren't right for you, but you're still missing that dream life that you envisioned creating with them. Or maybe when you were with them, you had a sense of security and comfort. And even though you know that they're not the right person for you, you still want that security and comfort. So you're struggling to move past the breakup. So consider what you might feel like you're lacking in your life by not being with them. Consider what you think is missing from your life that maybe having them around helped to fill that void. And this can take a lot of work, and even working with a professional or a coach like myself to figure out what is keeping you stuck. But once you can recognize what you feel that you're lacking, it's much easier to see that maybe this isn't even really about your ex or that old relationship, And instead, it's actually about you and the life that you're living and the life that you want. And getting to a point where you can have the life you want even without that relationship. And actually, it's at that point where you're better equipped to date with confidence and abundance anyway, and then you have a better shot at building a healthy relationship like you want. And if this still doesn't quite answer your question, I know I'm referring back to a lot of old episodes today, but definitely go back and check episode 18 called How to Actually Get Over Your Ex. The last question I'll answer is, how can I practice self-love in everyday life? I've talked before a little bit about self-love and replacing it with self-acceptance. And actually, slightly off topic, but if you've ever heard anything about the difference between body positivity and body neutrality, this might make a lot of sense. In body positivity, there's sort of a pressure to really love your body and to think that it's beautiful every day, no matter what. But with body neutrality, the focus is taken off of thinking that your body is beautiful and instead having a little bit more of a neutral view on your body where you just kind of accept your body. It's not really about having a positive or negative feeling towards it, but just accepting it. Like, yes, this is my body. It moves. It carries me from place to place. Sometimes it changes. It gets bigger. It gets smaller. It gets stretch marks, and I accept all of this. For some women, body positivity can actually get really exhausting, and it might start to feel like they have all this pressure and responsibility to feel a certain way about their bodies, and maybe that pressure doesn't actually make them feel any better. It just becomes another image-related stress. So body neutrality might actually be more helpful and healthy for them. So maybe you can relate to this. And I think with self-love in general, I also think that sometimes it can be helpful to think in terms of self-acceptance instead. You don't always have to have really positive feelings about yourself. It's okay sometimes if you want to change things about yourself, or to admit that you have struggles, or maybe you have certain tendencies or personality traits that you don't really love, but you accept that it is part of you. And you can do certain things to keep growing, but you're not trying to be perfect. You're not going to keep pressuring yourself to change until you love everything about yourself. No, it's okay to have some parts of yourself that you just kind of accept. I'm like this actually with my anxiety. Sometimes my anxiety is just triggered. I just have an anxious response, and I accept that. And actually being in this more neutral mindset allows me to think more rationally. I don't love my anxiety, but I also don't hate it so much that I'm ashamed of it and I'm constantly trying to fight it. No, I just have anxiety sometimes. And in those moments, I do whatever I can to keep myself grounded and not act on my anxiety. I just sit with it and accept it and watch it. For you, it could be something similar, or it could be how you're not so good at remembering things, or that you get a little envious of others sometimes, or whatever it might be. Maybe you just have some quality that you don't love, but you accept it. And aside from this, aside from switching to a self-acceptance mindset, there are plenty of ways that you can practice self-love in your daily life. Setting boundaries is one of the biggest ones, and deciding how you spend your time is definitely an act of self-love and self-care. I think getting really clear on your values and then actually living your life day in and day out by those values is such an amazing act of self-love. Taking time for the things that energize you is definitely self-love. And learning new things and gaining a new perspective on things too is definitely self-love. I mean, that could be reading books or listening to a podcast like this one, or even just talking to people who think differently than you or who have a different experience or perspective than you've had. That's self-love, because you're allowing yourself to grow and expand what you know and what you think to be true. And I mean, if that's not self-love, I don't really know what is. All right, that's all the questions that I'll answer this time around, but make sure to follow me on Instagram at Bree_Schmidt. And also go sign up to receive email updates from me, including having first access to new freebies, getting discounts for coaching, and other offers sent right to your inbox. And of course, being able to send me questions like the ones I answered today. So you can sign up for those emails at brieschmidt.com/sign up. And you can also find that link over in this episode's show description. All right. Thanks for listening as always. Until next time.